Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Windy City Block by Block Real Estate Show. My name is Dawn Haley, and I am your host for this evening. And I'm always so happy that you take time out of your busy schedule, and even with this snow that we have gotten, I know most of us have, if not loved it in the beginning, and now we are tired of it. But all I can say is, it's just so beautiful, and I know I get it. You're ready for it to start melting, but in my occupation, it's just great at this time to see how other communities they look all alike now. No matter what its social economic status is, you really don't see the difference. So that's one of the things that I like about snow. It's just so refreshing. But I get it. It's time to go. But thanks for stopping through. I have a great show tonight. I have another very smart attorney that is gracing as a guest today, and I am so glad. I'm gonna bring him in, but first let me introduce him. His name is Ryan Shafe. Guess because I've been saying his name incorrectly, and I apologize. But he is a real estate attorney that prior to launching his own business, he was successfully representing residential and commercial and industrial property owners in appealing their estate taxes. And now he's now had his own company for 4 years. And so another thing about him is he's a techie and a math. I think he said he's a math. I think his major was math. So those ingredients can make for a great attorney that is dealing with assessing taxes. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Ryan on so we can introduce him to our audience. Hey, Ryan, thanks for stopping through. I truly, truly, truly am humbled and grateful that you stopped through and you want to be on my show to talk about real estate appeal, because I don't have to tell you. You deal with it every day. That people are, at least in Cook County, hate when those tax bills come in. So how do you kind of calm folks down and just get them in the mind of understanding what this process takes?
Well, first off, hi, thanks for having me. My name is Ryan Shafkus, and well, right now a lot of people are getting their tax bills. The first installment for Cook County just came out about a week or two ago, and so I'm getting a lot of calls. People are like, "Hey, what can I do about this? This bill is too big." And the really fun part about Cook County is that first installment bill is actually 55% of the prior year's bill. So there's not really anything you can do about it. It's kind of just a calculation. But I always let people know that we can start fighting their property taxes. We can save them some money and make sure they understand what they've gotten themselves into by owning property in Cook County and
Yeah.
in Illinois.
Yeah, and I have a question because I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. And if you look at me kind of, why did she ask that question? I always say no question is a dumb question. But for some time, you used to get some representatives to come out and tell you what you need to do in order to appeal your taxes. And at least in my experience, a lot of people come out empty. They don't achieve what they initially started out for. So is it something that it's just not common knowledge as to what you need to do in order to, or does it just sound good on paper, but to actually have that happen, that's a whole different ball game?
So a lot of people want to appeal their taxes. They want to save money, and they go and they try to do it themselves, or they'll hire people. But like the actual process of appealing taxes, people, as you know, you deal with people in buying and selling homes, and people sometimes their idea of what things should be worth, for example, in their house might not be the reality of the market.
Mm-hmm.
And the buyers might be like, it should be worth less. Sellers think stuff's worth more. With property taxes, people don't really understand what we're even comparing sometimes, and how the taxes are even formulated, because it's a calculation based on a bunch of stuff, and they'll go in attempting to fight their taxes on their own, but they'll present an argument that they don't realize doesn't actually say that their taxes are overvalued. They look at a tax bill, a number. It's $10,000 is my tax bill, when in reality, the numbers that we look at for appealing and for fighting those tax bills are based on very different things. And so it's a system where you just have to understand what you're getting yourself into if you're trying to fight and lower the taxes. Because I've had multiple people come to me over the years where they say, I've appealed these taxes before, nothing happened. I went and did it. And I even had an attorney come to me and they showed me what they appealed with, and their information that they had appealed with basically confirmed the assessor's evaluation. They didn't realize they went through the whole process. They submitted an appeal. They submitted their evidence, and their evidence basically said that the assessor did a good job, which wasn't what they wanted, but they didn't realize that they were saying that because what the assessor looks at and what the Board of Review looks at is different than what the typical homeowner thinks about when they're thinking property taxes. And that's just it's a common thing that happens. People just don't fully understand this whole fun process.
But to me, it's, and I could be wrong, but it's kind of designed that way. I mean, before I got into real estate, I still have to scratch my head when I look at it, because I do understand some things, but to a person who has no idea of what the different breakdowns are, I used to work with a village, and residents got so mad when taxes went up, and they always thought it was the village that was actually raising their taxes, and didn't understand, well, at least in Cook County, that there's so many tax body entities, and how do they figure how much, do they actually come to your home and they say, oh, your home, yours is comparable to the others, or is it just an algorithm that they pick and say that's what yours is close to?
Yeah, and the system really is very much data driven, and the biggest reason this whole process even exists is Cook County has 1.84 million parcels, I believe, give or take, and there's a small assessor staff, and they have to assess every property once every 3 years, and so there's a cycle that they do that through, but they're required to do just an astounding feat, and they have to do everything with a big data approach. They will often visit individual properties as needed to verify certain things, but there's just a lot of, I'm assuming 600,000-ish parcels each year that they have to review. The assessor doesn't have nearly the staff they need to fully start looking at individual circumstances. And so everything is data driven based on the data that they have. Yeah. And they try to make sure it's the best that they can, but that is, they're not often looking at individual circumstances. They don't look at what you paid for your house because they simply just can't. There's no way, and they don't know, if your purchase price was below market because there was massive damage to the property that hasn't been repaired. They don't know if you're paying above market because of some specific circumstance, like you need to be moved for, whatever reason. There's a lot of external circumstances, and that's the reason there's just a lot of confusion, uncertainty, and there's just so much variation in the assessments. And that's the reason that you have to kind of actually appeal them, because otherwise, you're just, there's things that are going to be incorrect.
Well, this is what I want to do, because I know you and I talked about doing a little presentation. Absolutely. So that people can kind of, walk through what that process looks like. But before we do that, we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, you're going to start to show some things that to at least give the audience an opportunity to understand how this system works, as complicated as it is. And
We'll
you
try
already
to
know
break
that.
it down a
Yeah,
little
well,
bit.
and you know what? That's why, Ryan, I have you here today because I mean the real estate, and then we're going to go into a break. Real estate taxes have now become just as much as a person's principal and interest. And I did a little commercial. And if you don't, if you can't do this yourself, you should seek a professional service to help you, because you could be paying more real estate taxes than you have to. So when we come back, Ryan's going to break that down. So we'll be right back in a moment. Okay. All right. So we are back. And again, we have Ryan. Ryan, I want to make sure I am saying your last name correct. Shafkus from
That's
the
it.
law
Shay.
office from Ryan Shafkus, and he is sharing some information about appealing your taxes. So we're gonna go ahead and let Ryan give a presentation. So hopefully that'll help you to kind of understand what you know and enhance what you should be knowing. Okay, so Ryan, I'm going to let you go ahead and take the floor. Let's bring your presentation up. There we
Perfect.
go.
All right. So this is just a presentation. It kind of gives a rundown of property taxes. So helps with a bit of just understanding the basics in Illinois, because it's a ridiculous system, to be frank. So the first thing I always like to mention is that property taxes in Illinois are paid in arrears. So in 2020, we paid taxes that were based on the 2019 assessment. And what that means is when you're talking appeals, you have to appeal right now in 2021. You have to appeal for something that you won't see until next year in 2022. Cook County, we pay installments. We pay in two installments, and they're not exactly equal. Most other counties in Illinois, actually, you get a tax bill, and it's if you have a $10,000 tax bill, they chop it into two, and you have two installments of $5,000. In Cook County, if you have a $10,000 tax bill, your first installment is 55% of whatever you paid last year. So if it was $10,000, your first installment is $5,500, and then your second installment, it gets fully calculated in July when it comes out in July, and it's payable August. And that's where they actually figure out what the assessment is based on the any appeal you may have done. They take out your homestead exemption, any other exemptions you're entitled to, your senior, your veteran, etc. And they figure out what the bill is, and they just subtract what you paid in that first installment, and that's how they come up with it. Every other county, again, does it differently, but Cook County is a bit unique. And she had mentioned earlier too, people talk about like the village. They think the village is the one responsible for your tax bills. Your tax bill is made up of four parts, and that tax rate is only one part of it. And that tax rate, your village, your local municipality, is only a small portion
Very
of
small.
that tax rate.
Yes.
And so it kind of breaks down. But the tax bill itself is calculated with four parts. There's the assessment, and that's the number that you fight when you appeal your taxes. You're fighting the assessed value. It's the basis. Everything else is multiplied in, but then you have your tax equalization factor, and that's something set by the state. Again, it's a formula that you have no real input into. Then there's the tax rate, which is decided after they take the total assessments of the area, whatever. Let's say you live in Chicago, the city of Chicago sets its budget. Then they find out how much assessment there is throughout the whole city of Chicago. And they say, okay, we need however many billions of dollars. And they just divide that by the assessment. And that's how they get their tax rate. And then if you own a home, you get exemptions. Your homestead exemption applies, your senior freeze, etc. And those all just come off, and then they calculate it. So that's kind of the basics of your tax bill. And the most important one to understand is the assessed value. That's the one that everything gets multiplied to. And when I appeal taxes and when you should appeal your taxes, you're actually appealing the assessed value. In theory, it's connected to the market value of the house. In Cook County, if your house is worth $300,000, your assessed value is $30,000. It's a 10% level of assessment. Every other county in Illinois, it's a 1/3, so 33.33%. So if it's a $300,000 house, your assessment is $100,000. And that is just the way, again, the Cook County is a bit unique. And this is the number that all property owners can and absolutely should appeal. Because if you don't appeal it, you're really just kind of leaving money on the table.
Right. And can I, if you don't mind me asking this question,
Sure.
and then I do want to, if anyone has a question that you want to ask Ryan, just post it and I will definitely ask that question that you are asking of him. But once the season opens for your particular county and you miss it, is there another opportunity that you can try to appeal your taxes, or once you miss it, you have to wait?
So there is a specific 30-day window where you can appeal at the Board of Review or the assessor. In Cook County, the assessor has a formal process to
Mhm.
appeal where there's a specific window. But the Board of Review is the most important one. There's a 30-day window. If you do not submit a complaint in that window, that's it. You're done. There's no uh, there's no ability to appeal. You miss the window.
Look,
Hey, there we
I'm sorry. I only meant to bring you and take myself out, but
go. There, I'm here. But we also lost your audio, so um, I'm just the whole show now. So if you do miss that window, it really kind of is unfortunate. And I have clients every year talk to me 2-3 days after a deadline, and there's not a lot I can do for them, unfortunately. Um, all right, there's the presentation now too. All right, so I cannot hear you anymore, though, Dawn. Just so you know.
and that's fine because I
Okay,
want them to hear you.
perfect. I just wanted to make sure. All right, so I will. I'll jump back to it, but the this is just a breakdown again of that assessed value versus market value. And I always point this out to people who are looking at buying or selling a home. If you're selling your house and you're in Cook County and it's assessed at 30,000, but you're listing it for 200,000, you probably have a really good case to appeal that. And similarly, if you're looking to buy a property and it's assessed at 30,000 and you're about to put in an offer for 200,000, there's going to be a really good case for you to appeal it as well once you own the property. The thing that she had mentioned earlier was about the tax rate, and there's kind of just a breakdown. This is absolutely not guaranteed, but just to show you, in Cook County, most of your property tax bill just goes straight to schools. That's how we fund. It's all local. So you're funding your local school district, and they're typically anywhere from 50 to 75% of your bill is going to go to the schools. After the schools, there's water, there's your township, there's your village, there's the parks, there's the libraries. Those types of things will all be on there, but percentage-wise, they are minuscule compared to the taxes. This is an example where the county is 5%, the village and the township, which includes, parks and stuff like that, 15%. You have miscellaneous things for roads and other stuff like that, 10-13%. And the schools on this one are 66% of this person's tax bill. And that's how it is pretty much throughout large parts of Illinois. Again, some are a little bit different, 50%, maybe up to 75%, but that's where most of your money ends up going. And so when Dawn, you had mentioned there's people complaining to the village, your village is taxing you minuscule amounts compared to what the schools do. And that's really where
And that's a hard argument that I find that's difficult for villages to overcome, because the residents just automatically assume that it's the village that's causing their taxes to go up, and don't realize what you just pointed out is it really goes to the schools. And
Mhm.
when they raise their assess, because they can raise their levy, correct?
Yeah, so every one of those people can most of them at least, can raise their levy. It depends on what their budget are. And some schools, some districts might have to pass a local referendum to raise it a certain amount. It depends on what's going on in that school district. They could be looking to build a new school, update stuff, hire more staff, and that can result in them, looking to raise their actual tax rate. But again, the biggest calculation just comes to the total assessed value of whatever their taxing area is and the budget of whatever they need. So even if their budget changes a little bit, again, you have to look at it. If their budget increases by 5%, it's a 5% increase on a, one half or 2/3 of your tax bill. It's not the whole thing. And that's actually a thing that's come up a lot recently, because with COVID, various people have talked about freezing certain taxes. And like the county said, we're not going to raise taxes, but the county is a small portion of it. And the school districts right now, even though they're not in person, they still have a budget. They have a building they have to maintain. They have salaries they have to pay. And they've even gotten more expensive, having to adjust for e-learning while still having to maintain the building. They don't get to stop paying for the building even if there's less people in it. So
Right.
those budgets it's going to be a very interesting year when those final numbers come out this year. And
Yeah, it's funny though. That's why it's important to have you on, because yes, that is a scary factor, Ryan, that that we're probably going to be looking at some point our real estate taxes going up, if not very soon. So that was one reason why I had to have you on the show, to at least give my audience an opportunity to think about options that might be out there if they've
absolutely.
been unsuccessful in reducing their taxes, if they've tried. So
And the other thing too, with not just reducing your taxes through appeals, this slide, exemptions, it is really important to understand what exemptions you're entitled to, and to make sure you're getting the exemptions that you're entitled to.
you answer you you believe it or not, I have it right here. Our clients, not our homeowners, not getting all of their exemptions. So you're going right to my question. So
I will absolutely continue on here. Um, that is one of the biggest things I've been able to help people with through the past year. A lot of people are looking at their taxes, starting to understand things, and they're asking me a lot of questions. With exemptions in Cook County, the nice thing is you can actually correct them. If you were entitled to a homestead exemption, which is if you own the property where you live, your house, then you're entitled to a homestead exemption. What that is in Cook County is it's a calculation that typically ranges anywhere from $500 to $3,000, frankly, depending on where your property is, and that's based on your local tax rate. Again, if your tax rate is 10%, then you're entitled to a homestead exemption of about $1,000. But those vary wildly throughout Cook County. But the nice part is, if you bought a property and you've lived there for 5 or 6 years, and you look at your bill one day and you realize you're not getting a homestead exemption, you can actually apply for what's called a certificate of error, and you can get that exemption retroactively, where the county will literally just cut you a check, and they'll say, sorry, they didn't know about it, and they'll just issue you a check if you provide them with the appropriate affidavits, copies of your driver's license, etc., that they'll ask you to do. They've even put a really good website out online at the Cook County Assessor. They have an online application where you can DocuSign everything. You can upload a picture of your driver's license, and you can fill out and sign an affidavit and get the certificate of error applied for and refunds issued pretty quickly. It's one of the things the new assessor has done, and it's a great thing.
Is there, a question that I have, because, seniors, of course, are always concerned about the senior and the senior freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a specific cap on your income in order to receive the senior citizen and the senior freeze exemption?
So that's a great question. And so the way it works, the first thing is all exemptions are based on essentially there being a homestead exemption. Now, this is the most important thing to note, is if you buy a property, the exemptions are based on who lived there on January 1st of the tax year. And again, we pay in arrears. So in 2021, the bill you get in July is calculated based on who lived there on January 1st, 2020. This frustrates a lot of new homeowners, because if they bought a vacant property that didn't have an exemption, they don't get it for quite some time because, again, it's January 1st. And if you buy in February of 2021 and the tax bill comes out this year, you're not going to get an exemption, or you're not entitled to it. Your seller may have been entitled to it, but if there was a vacant property that didn't have one, you might not get it. And then next year, when you apply, you're still technically not eligible because January 1st of 2021, it was the vacant seller. And then it's the following year in 2023 when you're actually going to see it, because that's 2022 is when you're eligible, and that shows up in 2023. It is a bit wild. Now, that's the homeowners. Once you have that homestead exemption, if you're above the age of 65, that's the only requirement for the senior exemption. Then you can get an additional exemption over the age of 65. And the 65 is actually just if you turn 65 that year. It's not if you're 65 as of January 1st. It's just that calendar year, you turn 65, you're entitled to the exemption the next year, assuming you have an existing homestead exemption. The final one is the senior freeze, which does have that income cap. And that is based on you having a homestead, having the property as your homestead, being above the age of 65, and then the senior freeze has a household income limit of $65,000. So what that means is if your income from any and every source, Social Security, pensions, retirements, your job, is above $65,000 a year, you're not eligible for the freeze. The other thing is it's household income. So if you have an adult child living with you and working, their income is part of that. And so you have to combine it all to figure out. So you have to be below that $65,000 a year cap. And on top of that, the freeze itself doesn't actually offer a significant reduction. So it offers a small little reduction, but then what it does is it locks the assessed value in. So that assessed value then gets frozen, and your tax rate can still change, and it will still change, but your tax rate is never going to change by 70% in 1 year. I say never, but don't hold me to that. But realistically, your tax rate's never going to change by a significant amount. It might go up or down a little. Every year it's going to happen. But your assessment, which again is the basis of your tax bill, and it's the largest part of your tax bill, is the number that gets frozen. And that is frozen for as long as you own the house and as long as you file every year and confirm that your income has remained below $65,000. And so that's the biggest thing. It is the senior freeze requires an annual application because there is an income limit. And so you have to confirm every year that you're still not making above the 65,000.
Yeah. Well, I've got another question to ask you, but we're going to take a little break to let you take just a few minute debrief. And then when we come back, we're going to continue with your presentation. So awesome. Guys, we'll be right back and with some more good information about appealing your taxes. Hold on, please.
That does the things that you do. just wanna call, see if we're okay, babe. All I wanna ask you is, I don't wanna push you farther away, no. I don't wanna play no games. I just wanna call, see if we're okay, babe. All I wanna ask you is, are you down for love? Are you up for us? Wanna be together, be together. Babe, I want your love. I'll be the one you trust. You're all that matters, all that matters. Are you down for love? Are you up for us? Wanna be together, I wanna be Babe, I want your love, your love. I'll be the one you trust. You're all that matters, all that matters to me.
All right, we are back, and Ryan's been giving us some good information. Ryan, I had a couple of questions about some other exemptions, if you don't mind me
Absolutely.
asking.
We're on exemptions right now.
Yes, yes. What about? I came across some long, what is it? Long time homeowners exemption.
Yeah, the long-time homestead exemption was an older exemption. They've actually kind of sunset that, so it's not really applicable anymore. That was an exemption they offered in Cook County, but I believe they sunset that as of 2015, if I'm correct.
What about home improvement exemption? Is that
The
another one?
home improvement exemption is a spectacular exemption to be aware of. It's also one of the weirdest exemptions because it happens when you typically pull a permit. You pull a permit, I'm going to put a second story on this house. You pull a permit, I'm going to add a basement or whatever, put a sunroom on, or add 1,000 square feet to the house. And what the home improvement exemption does is once that permit is finalized, instead of immediately adding a new valuation to your property and say, okay, your square foot just changed from 2,000 to 2,500 square feet in your house, or whatever the case may be, that home improvement exemption is a temporary exemption that essentially lets you be assessed as what you were prior for a couple years. It's about 4 years, I believe, and I think it may fade off and then slowly get you to where you're going to be going forward. But it does allow for a temporary reduction for home improvements, for major home improvements. This isn't for stuff like, upkeep, which is considered, remodeling, or, putting windows, roofs, floors, siding, that sort of stuff. This is for when you really change the characteristics of a house. The other one, go ahead.
No. So I can see, because, of course, I won't say what sellers are doing this, but a lot of times sellers won't get a permit to have work done to their home because they're trying to avoid their home being assessed at a higher value. So is this kind of an incentive to say, look, tell us what you're doing. We'll give you an exemption so you don't, so you're not, just going nuts when you get your, when you get your tax bill.
Yeah. So that is, it really is. It's kind of an incentive to counter that. But the biggest thing, and I always tell people this, is especially in Cook County, the assessor is typically never going to care you pulled a permit for anything. Like, unless you add square footage and, again, change the facts of your house, I can't imagine a single permit the assessor can possibly care about. Like, you pull a permit for windows, siding, roof, all of them at the same time, it still is not going to impact your assessment. The assessor, again, is using mass data, and they assume people are going to replace their roof every 10, 20, 40 years based on the lifespan of a roof. And they have calculations and stuff for that. So the assessor, at least in Cook County, never really cares about your the permits you pull. And that exemption is exactly that. It's an incentive to encourage people to pull permits for things that would impact the factual characteristics of their property, or just in pulling permits in general, because you are 100% correct in that a lot of people do not pull permits for all sorts of things. The other exemption that I like to talk about is the veterans exemption. The veterans exemption there's a small exemption for returning veterans. So recently, any veteran who's recently served can get a small exemption. But the bigger one is if there's a veteran with a service-related disability, and in Cook County, or actually most of Illinois now, that can be up to a total property tax exemption for properties valued under, I think it's like $750,000, give or take. That number kind of fluctuates. There is a ceiling on it, but you can have a decent house if you have a service-related disability with no property taxes in Illinois. And that was something. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I should say that was one of those things that got pushed through by like the old assessor and stuff like that. It took a long time to get through, and recently got enacted. And there's just a lot of people who they're not even aware of it.
Yeah. And I'm going to let your screen come back, but I've got, because I've got a lot of questions, and I'm sorry if I, ask a lot of questions, but if you have a veteran that lives, the veteran isn't on title, but they live in your home, and is there a way that you can get the exemption, if it can be applied to your property?
So that is a very good question. And the easiest way to do it is to just add them as an owner on title. It's the most clear-cut way, because the rule is if they own the property, they use it as their primary residence, or not necessarily own, but if they use the property as their primary residence and they are responsible for the tax bill, and then they're entitled to the exemption. And so those are the requirements. And the easiest way to meet that second one is put them on the deed, because if they're on title to the house, they are responsible for the property taxes. And if it's their primary residence, that's a great thing to do, because like I said, there can be a $0 tax bill for that.
Right.
I had a client who actually came to me because their property, their disabled, it was a disabled father's on the deed to the house, and they'd always had a disabled veterans exemption. And for the past several years, they've had no tax bill. Then they got reassessed to a value on their house that was so high that the exemption actually wasn't big enough. And that was a reassessment where they went up about 40%,
wow,
which can happen sometimes in Cook County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh.
And they didn't appeal it because they didn't think about it, because they had the disabled veterans exemption, and it actually they ended up with a tax bill of a couple $1,000s, but they then realized that their disabled veterans exemption was basically a $22,000 exemption at that point. And so, yeah, they had that person on title. That is always the recommended way to do it. Put them on the deed to the property, and then they will be entitled to that exemption, assuming, again, that's their primary residence.
And does that also apply for, and see, folks, we're just giving you some things to think about. Does that also apply for a senior living with you? Because let's face it, a lot of our baby boomers are now having to bring their parents into their home and take care of them. And is that also applicable in terms of our seniors that we're taking care of, our senior parents that we're taking care of?
Absolutely applicable. And the same thing applies. The best way to do it is add them to the deed to the property and apply for the senior exemption. The senior exemption in most areas is going to run you anywhere from $400 to, like I said, I've seen $2,000 senior exemptions. It's not the freeze, just the exemption.
Just the exemption, yeah.
The exemption is based on how big it is based on your tax rate. But what it is, you can absolutely add them on. And again, same rules apply. They have to live there as their primary residence. If they're on the deed, it kind of de facto means they're responsible for the tax bill, so they're entitled to that exemption, and they are that they can you start getting that exemption. You probably won't be applicable for the freeze because again they're going to take their income and your income. It's all going
Right,
to be
right,
combined. But the
right.
senior exemption is still something to consider. Most often it's somewhere in the range of $600 to $900 give or take, and that can 1 year of that can easily cover just the transferring, the cost to record a new deed or have someone draft a new deed for you. So
Right, right,
it
right.
is it's always something that is beneficial. It's really
Yeah.
just that's all it is. You save money, and there's the number of people not getting the proper exemptions is a lot because people's mortgages pay their taxes, and your tax, you escrow your taxes every month. They take care of it when it comes out, and they tell you if you're short or if you have excess, and that's it. So people don't look at those bills and they don't realize they're not getting their exemption.
Well, I know you still had some more information you want to share, but I
Sure.
do not want to overlook at least sharing to those that are listening, Ryan, how they can touch bases with you, because earlier we talked about, people can try to do this on their own, but I'm gonna be very frank. I'm a realtor. I did it on my own, or shall I say for our home. And with the knowledge that I have, I still did not get the rock bottom price. So, and I had to utilize the service of an appeals attorney. And I was, my husband was the one like, let's do it. I'm like, pride. Uh, I took care of that. Don't worry about it. But my husband did it anyway. And the next thing you know, we got an additional 1,200 more off our yearly real estate taxes. So, God bless you if you want to do it on your own. But I would highly recommend you giving Ryan a call. So Ryan, please share how people.
Absolutely.
I'm just
I,
keeping it real.
I will. I always recommend people appeal. And the biggest thing too is not just appealing once. You can appeal multiple times a year, every year, and it's my job. So that's what I do all the time. And everyone else, you have other jobs, and you're not gonna watch these deadlines. But you can reach me. My name's Ryan Shafkis.
I'm gonna stick. Let me
You
put
can.
that up there. Yes, indeed.
There
There
you
we
go.
go.
That's
Mhm.
my website. There's a contact form on there. You can send me an email directly at ryan@shafkislaw.com. And that's my phone number. You can call or text that number. I'm happy to answer texts as well. And I'm happy to talk to anyone, consult, and have initial conversations for free. My fees for tax appeals are based purely on a contingency basis, which means I don't get paid or send a bill unless I've saved you money. And it's a fee
Repeat
of.
that again so people can hear that and say it louder.
So I don't charge up front. I don't charge if I lose. My fees are based only in the event of a successful reduction, and it's a percentage of the first year's estimated savings, ballpark around 30% or less, give or take, for most of the Cook County properties for residential stuff. So it's one of those things where you can only come out ahead. Do it yourself, hire someone, but it's absolutely worth pursuing because there's just a lot of stuff. And I've oftentimes found that I can just get people exemptions, get their money, get them refunds from the city pretty quick. And, just that can happen relatively quick, while the appeals process can take a year and a half before you even see the benefit of it. Because if you contact me right now in Cook County, you're not going to see any benefit from an appeal until August of 2022, which is at least like 18 months away from now. And if you have a escrow, it could be 19, 20, 21 months before you see an actual benefit of an appeal at this point. But give me a call, text, email me, go on my website, fill out the contact form. Any of those are perfectly fine. I'd be happy to answer questions. People have, just even like, hey, what is this? Can you do it? Is it, I have this. I have a condo. A lot of people don't realize that if you have a condo or a townhome, your association may be appealing on your behalf already. Some of them do, some of them don't. And if you're in a condo and they're not appealing, I'd be happy to represent your individual unit or the building or association as a whole as well. So,
and there's a couple of nuggets I do want to also share
sure.
as well. Now, you see, I'm always saying something. Can you appeal when you're getting ready to buy a property?
So
And
yeah,
you're under, so yes, I want you, yeah, because
that
unfortunately, and I just want to get this out, and then you can go on and just go right through that door, Ryan. Unfortunately, of course, Cook County taxes are high, and sometimes that other seller may have never appealed the taxes. And you can go ahead, Ryan.
you can, if you're buying a property, you have it under contract, and you have your 30-day window. If it's open, you can submit an appeal as the person responsible for the taxes pursuant to a contract, because you're going to be the one buying those taxes, and you're the one certainly going to be paying those taxes, no matter where you're closing. You're going to be the one paying the actual tax bill because we pay in arrears, and so you should. It's always in your interest to appeal. I actually had a seller contact me who was appealing, and his realtor pointed out the incorrect square footage the assessor had, and we ended up saving that person, I think, $6,000 to $8,000 on
Wow.
there. This was a big error.
Yeah,
But the
of course.
assessor
Yeah.
it was off by, it was like 1,800 square feet or something like that. They were over assessing this property. And what ended up happening is the seller appealed it, even though the buyer was going to be the one who benefited, because the buyer, the seller, the realtors all worked with me together. And we ended up saving the buyer a ton of money going forward because we corrected this error. And the nice thing was, because this was a square footage error, the seller was able to correct that fact, and they're going to save on the 1 year because they're going to prorate less because of the closing, but they're also going to go back. We're going to go back 4 years and
Wow.
get refunds from the assessor. And this all happened because a realtor pointed out the square footage was wrong on the assessor's site, and the buyer was interested in pursuing this and willing to work with that seller to get that all done. But
Yeah.
I've seen people just sneak in an appeal like 2 days before the deadline. They're like, I'm not closed yet, but I'm pretty sure we're going to, this is going to close. I don't want to miss my appeal deadline, because you can tell sometimes things are just way over assessed,
Right.
especially in a very varied market. There's a lot of properties that are, selling really quickly for good prices, and there's some properties that are selling a little bit less than, and a lot of that's the high end stuff. Like, you have houses that are assessed at 1.5 million, and it might sell for 1.1,
Yeah.
and that's a really good time as the buyer to sneak in an appeal there.
Yeah.
And it is, as the buyer, you are entitled to do that, and I believe it's fully worth that.
Yeah, it's definitely, especially when there may have never been any appeals ever done on that property, and you might be the
The
lucky
first
nugget. Let's
one.
see. Do we have a question? I think a question just popped up here, Ryan. Um, oh, well, someone just said this is money saving valuable information. Thank you. Yes, thank you. But before I forget too, you're also available if someone needed to know, because often we see where there's no exemption on a property, and the listing agent can't tell you, the investor can't tell you, and so how would one know unless they knew to go to a source that can say, hey, this is what, and it's not something that you can just magically pull out and say, well, the house that's similar to that's what it's. No, that's not necessarily a good rule of thumb, would you say?
So to look, if you're looking at a property, you want to kind of figure out what's happening with it. I'm more than happy to answer. It's tricky to look at what the tax situation is going to be when you don't know, and I often will just review things for people looking at properties and trying to figure out what's going on.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? Remember I told you, Ryan, before we started, that hour goes so
I was gonna say
fast. And I just hope you had a good time sharing because you brought so much, in my opinion, you brought so much information that people, if they just, really wanted to see if they can get their property assessment appealed, because like you said, what do you have to lose? What really do you have to lose to try and see how you can get those get that assessment down? Because taxes are going to be going up, so you might as well try to get it to the very low end that you possibly can. So how about you, Ryan? I wish I can go back to your presentation. Do you want to
Don't worry.
just add anything to that
No,
presentation?
here's what I say. I say everyone who owns property in Illinois should review their taxes for possible appeal. There's no downside in all you're doing is making sure you're paying your fair share.
Absolutely.
And to like go back to the beginning, we talk about people complaining to the local village and stuff like that. The reality is the assessor is doing their best to assess a lot of properties. They can make mistakes. They're human. They do make mistakes. And sometimes they just don't have all the facts. So in the system we have in Illinois, it's kind of on you to ensure it's all correct and you're paying the fair share. And it's just the way we've done it. Always take, do it yourself. Contact someone like myself. You can call, text, email me. It's always worth it to review your property to see if you can save. And examples every day. I had a client today, a property they're looking at versus an identical one next door. The identical one next door is never appealed, and their taxes are $8,000 higher than the literally identical buildings right next door to each other. And there's just because one appealed and one never had. It's really important to just see if you can save some money.
And again, like you said, it's not the assessor's responsibility to knock on your door or send you a letter. Hey, by the way, you know your neighbor next door is paying this and you're paying that. They're not, because they make their budget and they have to meet their budget. And
the assessor has their formula. They apply it to whatever they do, and then if you don't appeal it, it's not going to go down. That's kind of the biggest thing. If you don't appeal your assessment, if the assessor might knock it down, but they do that once every 3 years, and you can kind of nudge them along the way if you think it's a little too high. So.
Right. Well, thank you, Ryan. I'm going to have you back at a later date because you got more. Let's see. Did we get another question up here? Can you please repeat? You don't get paid unless what?
I don't get paid unless you save money. That's the end of that. It's you save money, then I send a bill. That's how that works. So.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's a great position to be in. So really, back to what we just said. What do you have to lose if you have been living in your house I don't care if you just bought it. Heck, if there's an opportunity for you to lower your assessment, why not? I mean, interest rates are low, but if you can get your taxes to come down, why not? Real estate taxes to come down, why not? But listen, thank you, everyone. I hope you got something out of my show today with my guest, Ryan. And hey, his information is on the bottom. I'm going to put it in the comments so that you can just click and go directly to his page. But Ryan, thank you. I appreciate your time. Don't leave. I want to finish up with you towards the end. Okay. So everyone, listen, be safe. We're still under COVID, so look out for each other. Please, the safe distancing and all of those good things that'll keep us safe. And you guys take care of yourself. And until next time, peace. All right.